Well, we could go on this area for for a long time, seeing my outrage. I think one of the things that women face as well from the issues of domestic violence is losing contact with her child or her children just because of what's happened. And I don't know if you, Kate, have seen that happen in any of the cases you've dealt with.
It can happen, certainly. And I've heard of cases where part of the domestic violence control is, as we were saying, the threats that, if you do something, I'll kill you. If you leave, I'll take the children. And it does happen. And when they say take the children, as we were saying earlier, it's a calculated decision. Where am I going to take them to? How am I going to take them? And you can find circumstances where it can happen if the woman, for whatever reason, has come to the conclusion. And I think that we really need to just make it clear that it's not a bad decision for these women to make this decision if they were going to leave the children there. It's the best one that they make in the circumstances. So while the media may be an uproar that how can you leave your children there, we don't know the context in which she came to that decision. But it does happen, and it can happen. And you could, in that circumstance, have a woman who has left for whatever reason at all to secure safety. It may be that she intended to, in fact, go back the next day. She just wanted to go and sort something out for, it may be housing. Go and get the children. Come on, children, I'm going to go and get you from school. We're going. He may well, in that small period of time, take the children abroad. And it's very much, for example, the threat of the passports. It all comes into it. And then if they are abroad, how on earth do we get them back? And you're then looking into, where have they taken them from a legal point of view? Is it part of the Hague Convention? Because if it is, then there are steps we can take to take them back, and they've all signed up to the treaty to have the children transferred back and forth between the countries. But what if it's not a Hague Convention country? What if it's the Far East or somewhere like that? Some of those countries aren't signed up to the Hague Convention. How on earth do we get the children back? And it's all part of the control. And that takes it, I know that takes it somewhat out of the Children Act, but it can happen. Part of the control within the Children Act, we were speaking earlier, that if the representation is gone through the legal aid changes to the definition of domestic violence, how on earth are we going to have a mother stand up against the perpetrator father, who, because they have had this element of control for so long, are very clever, like we were saying, of saying something that will make the woman or the mother just be quiet because of the implications that has meant over the past. We have to find a way that is, on the face of it, being taken away from them, to be able to stand up and say, this is what's going on. The father may well be there making these completely false allegations that, because the mother doesn't have the capacity to stand up against, may find herself on an adversely effective order through the Children Act. So it can happen, and it needs to be recognised, which is why it's such a horror that if specialists like ourselves in this room aren't able to help clients because of these restrictions, how on earth are they meant to be able to get their voice heard?
And there's one other factor which muffles women's concerns. If there is a contact case going on, a dispute about what's to happen to the children, and she has concerns about his ability to look after the child, it may just be incompetence, doesn't put their warm shoes on, or it may be doesn't watch them across the road, which is dangerous, or it may be gets drunk, doesn't shut the front door, actually is physically violent. There's a range of things which they might be worried about. But as we move towards a situation where the courts are more and more concerned about the child having a meaningful ongoing relationship with both parents, if you, as the parent, say something which implies that you're not supportive of the other parent's role, then you're seen as not a friendly parent, not a parent who is supporting this relationship with both parents, and the court may criticise you. That's what happened under the recent Australian legislation, that women simply daren't mention domestic violence, daren't mention their concerns, and allowed contact, shared residence to happen with a father who they had real worries about. And there were some very, very distressing cases where children were harmed.
Certainly, and I've had cases recently in that context where financial issues have an immense effect on cases, and I've seen women quite recently who have come to me several years on from the original proceedings where they had an order in place, and said to me, well, I agreed to it because I simply couldn't fight it anymore. And that in itself is concerning. The same situation in terms of the finances are still there now. Time has moved on, circumstances has changed. The terms of the orders need to be looked at again, because just because they were appropriate 4, 5, 6 years ago doesn't necessarily mean they're appropriate for older children. We're still in the same situation where there is this element of control because he's still seeing the children, they are still coming back. Inevitably you get this shift between the parents, and daddy said this or mummy said this, and it gives rise to this element of control. They're still in a position where they can't finance it. It's something that needs to be appreciated, that this isn't just a now situation, it's something that has implications for the future as well.
I think what really concerns me is when the woman loses total contact with the child, when she is alienated by the children, because we're talking about how children are the victims of domestic violence as well. So not only is the attacker having control over the woman, but he's now had control over the children and taken away her right to be a mother to those children, because he's able to prove that. Because I know in some circumstances the mom might be a bit crazy, whatever you want to say, she's done, and then you were given the right, or you probably, or the man might say, or the abuser might say, well, if I was able to prove that she was a nutter and I had the children, then I was right. When in some cases that is not the case. Is the case is that you were the abuser, but you've just had an upper hand in convincing the judge, because possibly of no representation to do that, you've gone on to have the child. And I think that as women here in this room, we know that not having contact with your child is awful. It's like a bereavement. I know it's the same for a father, but if the mother has been the sole carer of that child for majority of that child's life, then you can't imagine what that would do to a woman, because it's very often the case that the woman is carries the 90 or 70% of the caring responsibilities of that child. So to be able to prove that he is the better parent to have that child, I think is just devastating for a woman.
I think we can't, I mean, there are so many different aspects to talking about domestic violence, and domestic violence and its impact on mental health is a really huge issue, because it does have an impact. It's not just a physical impact, there's also a psychological impact, and for some women that may well manifest as a mental health issue further down the line, in which case the perpetrator says, I told you all along she was mad, and look now, she's been sectioned, or she's under the care of a psychiatrist. And then that is used to take away the children from her. But actually, she was perfectly well before the abuse started. And I know that there are some women who would have had latent mental health issues, and that is a different matter. But I'm talking about women who, as a result of domestic violence, developed a mental health illness, and that is then used to punish them and to take the children away from them, or to reduce the amount of contact they have with their own children.
Can I say Maypole again?
Yes.
I think it is the first group that's been set up to try and help women through contact problems where there are domestic violence issues. There are wonderful organisations helping victims of domestic violence, and there are many vocal men's groups, and there's lone parents that are helped by gingerbread, but I think we felt that there was a real gap, a real need for some support for this particular group of women. So, we try and offer support, information, encourage research. And keep complaining about the legal aid changes.
Yeah, because I think that is... I was talking to a lady about this, and she was saying that it's like a bereavement. If this woman in particular hasn't seen her one for 6 years and one for 7 years, and it's almost like, okay, yeah, I have 3 children, but I only see one. I only have one, and it's almost like, yeah, that's how life is. But how does that make you feel? She said, well, if the children were no longer in existence, then I know that I have to move on from my life. But I can't move on because these children are alive. They're in their 20s now, and they're seemingly getting on with their lives. But she's thinking of their own mental health. Because I don't care what anyone says, if you know that you have a parent alive and you don't have access to them, that there's an underlined effect that it has on you. And if that's the case with those children, I hate to think, what's going to happen to them when they start forming their own relationships and those sorts of, issues that will come up because it will come up. You can't avoid that. That is unavoidable, and it is sad, that young children from no fault of their own have had to develop these issues with in relationships. It's terribly sad. Did you want to say something? Yeah.
I think I was just going to follow on from Mavis's point that I think that while the nature of what we're discussing is perhaps it certainly is a very difficult topic, I think that it is worth just reassuring the listeners that there is help out there, and these changes that we've been talking about today in the consultation haven't yet come through. And that's not to say that they won't, but that's still to say in the interim period there are specialists like Maypole that can support women who may not be eligible at this current stage for legal aid, regardless of whether it's taken away. There are specialists such as family lawyers that can give advice. It's as much as getting the information out there so that they know the possibilities as it is about discussing whether or not the next step can be taken in terms of the finances. How do we go about making these applications? And I think that just to reassure listeners that there are experts out there that can assist people. It's not all doom and gloom if